Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Right, welcome to the meeting of the Environment and Sustainability Policy Committee here on the 3rd of April, including those in the public gallery and anyone watching on the webcast. In terms of introduction, I'm going to ask the committee members to introduce themselves in a moment, but firstly, just to outline the emergency evacuation procedure. We're not expecting an alarm, so in the event of the sounding of the fire alarm, please do leave the room calmly through the exit, out from the lobby, down the main ramp from the main entrance, turn right, and we assemble in front of the cathedral. So just to introduce members of the committee, for those of you who may not know us all. Firstly, I'm Councillor Martin Fodor. I'm Chair of Environment and Sustainability Policy Committee, and I represent Redland Ward as well. Over to you.
Hi, good afternoon. Councillor Ellie King. I'm the Vice Chair of the Environment and Sustainability Committee and the member for Hillfields.
Hello, Councillor Tom Renhard, Labour member for Horfield Ward, and I'm subbing in for Councillor Kaider today.
I'm Tim Kent, Councillor for Hengrave and Whitchurch Park Ward.
Hi, Councillor Izzy Russell, Councillor for Ashley Ward.
Hi, I'm Abby Finch, Councillor for St George Central Ward.
And I'm Councillor James Crawford, Councillor for Bishopston and Ashley Down Ward.
Thanks very much. So we do have a couple of apologies and, as you heard, one substitution. So can we just confirm recorded those?
Yes, we've recorded apologies for Councillor Mishlat, Councillor Tate and Councillor Dudd, with Councillor Renhard attending as delegate.
Thanks very much. So we have the agenda this evening, and so I have to ask, are there any declarations of interest on any items on the agenda?
Hi, yeah, so one of the items on the agenda is about the Warm Homes grant. So I was eligible for a previous and a recipient of one of the previous grants in a similar type. And I think I might meet the eligibility criteria for this grant if it does become available. So I'm happy to step out if that is best. I'm happy either way.
Okay, thanks very much. Just to confirm, do we feel it's necessary, or are members happy with Councillor Finch?
Just to jump in, the recusal is down to yourself. So it's been recorded in the minutes that you have declared an interest. The recusal is down to yourself. What I can do is, if record your vote, and then if the committee and the chair feel that it doesn't affect your interest to have that vote count, then I can include that. Otherwise, I'll just record it in the minutes. Okay, so it's a hypothetical interest because you haven't yet sort of confirmed you would get a grant from this scheme that we might be approving. Okay.
Yeah, it's just that I might be eligible because I know I have been eligible for the previous one. Yeah, I mean, if there's no clear guidance, I'd be minded to leave just to be on the safe side. But
that's absolutely fine. I'll have a record of that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Do I leave now or at this time? Okay.
No. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. So the minutes of the last meeting, item 4. Does anyone have anything arising from the minutes that have been published from that meeting? I don't think so. Are we happy to accept them as a correct record of that meeting and that I sign them as chair? Okay, I'll take that as assent. Thank you very much. So item 5 is chair's announcements. So I do have a couple of things I would like to announce. As we put in the papers of this meeting, at a previous meeting of the full council, council mandated support of Bristol City Council for the Climate and Nature Bill through a silver motion that was debated at that council meeting. It was on December the 10th. And since it's of interest, matters led by this committee, we just have some information on progress with fulfilling the resolution that was voted by the council at that meeting. And the wording of the motion as passed is in the papers, is linked through the papers of the committee tonight. So this was a text that was given by the leader of the council following that. So as the Climate and Nature Bill has been adjourned in the House of Commons and will not return to the House until July and is unlikely to pass, Office's recommendation was instead to write to the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, articulate the organisation, Bristol City Council, supporting the bill and calling on government to embrace the intention and principles of the bill through non-legislative means. And the motion called on the Council to write to the Prime Minister, Leader of the House of Commons and opposition figures. However, it was felt best that the letter has been addressed to the Right Honourable Ed Miliband MP, the Secretary of State for Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, as the most appropriate person in government to address the letter to, particularly as the bill has been adjourned till July. And as the normal process that we have for strategy and public affairs process, that correspondence has been copied to our local MPs, so they're aware of that letter being sent, so they won't write separate letters to our MPs. However, in the covering email to MPs, we have encouraged MPs to push for the bill to be passed in Parliament in July, which is what the Council did wish to see, that bill gets approved. So just making sure that that's clear, that we have acted as closely as we can on the spirit of what was passed by the full Council in this chamber in December. A second item is about the Community Climate Action Investment Launch, which was carried out. I'm going to ask Alex Mintrell to update us on progress with that investment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, committee will recall that Bristol City Council, as part of the Treasury management rules that were approved in March last year, approved the use of what are sort of called municipal investment tools, where we can essentially borrow money from citizens to invest in City Council projects to replace funding that we would have perhaps borrowed from the Public Works Loan Board or other sources. And so, as part of a European funded project, our Net Zero Investment Lab, we've been working on doing such a thing with a company called Abundance Investment. And on the 2nd of March this year, we launched the Bristol Climate Action Investment Opportunity, which is currently live, and it runs for 90 days, so it's running for basically March, April and May. And that is giving residents the opportunity to invest anything from £5 upwards in City Council action to help decarbonise some of our estate and accelerate the work we've been doing. And it's investing in a number of particular projects that have previously been approved, including offices and a disabled children's respite care centre, and improving their energy efficiency and their providing solar panels, heat pumps, etc. And I've got some postcards which describe the opportunity, which I can share with committee members afterwards. And you may well see adverts on the back of buses and the like around the town at the moment. And in fact, I was on a website on a sort of online dictionary the day, and up popped the adverts either side of the word I was looking for. So that's very much live at the moment. And last time I looked, we were approaching £400,000 of investment by citizens of Bristol and beyond, which they are lending to the City Council, and will receive 4.2% interest over 5 years.
So that's excellent news. So through this opportunity to invest, which is something I've encouraged us to do for a few years now, we're raising money. It will be used to implement the decarbonisation that we've agreed in this committee. We're trying to achieve across the council estate. People are getting a return for their money, so it's good for them, good for the climate. And it's saving the services money, because those energy bills are going to be lower in care, respite homes, lighting, heating, laundry, so on. So it's excellent news. I looked and it was over £400,000 been raised in the 4 weeks since the start of March. So we're well on the way to the £1 million, and I think it's very worthwhile sort of return, 4.2%. So that's good news, and we hopefully continue to encourage people to if they have savings available, to put them in this fund to help decarbonise the city. And I think it's shown people are really committed to helping make things happen in Bristol. So that's good news. Finally, a brief item of Chair's announcement, just finally. I'd like to congratulate John Smith on my right, on your left, who is no longer the interim director of Growth and Regeneration, is now the director of Growth and Regeneration, executive director. So congratulations on that position. Okay, so item 6 is the public forum. We have a number of items of public forum. So we're going to go through a number of questions and then there'll be statements, and we have a microphone available. If we go, what we're checking is who is here. So I don't believe we have Ian Carter present, do we? No?
I think the first person on the list we have present is Mark Jacobs, but I can't recognise him.
Okay, so the next, yeah. So we had Kat Corbett, and then we have Laura Fogg-Rogers, who is here. Yeah. Question 6, you have we put in the questions on the board? No.
We only have Jenny to...
Oh, unfortunately we don't, yeah. Okay. So you had a question on the repair and reuse strategy, Laura. You have a microphone there. Have you received a response to that question? Would you like, given we can't display that, would you like to summarise what you asked or your comments on the response, if you have any follow-up questions?
Yep, thank you. So I'm Laura Fogg-Rogers. I'm an academic at the University of the West of England and also a member of the Bristol Repair Coalition. So I asked the question, so first of all, congratulating the Council on reviewing the waste and recycling strategy, upcoming, and also your goals to reduce general waste and increase diversion of waste to 65% by 2030. So they're great goals, we commend that. However, the aim of a strategy should not just be on recycling or incineration, reducing that. Really, we want to go up that waste hierarchy towards reuse and repair, which is within a circular economy that we're aiming for. So our question was, will Bristol City Council build on the successful initiatives of the last 5 years and include making provision for greater support of repair and reuse as part of the new waste contract and strategy? The response we had was compiled with several other questions. It's a great response. We congratulate and thank the Council for that, but we do have a supplementary question. So could you give an indication of timelines for engagements with the Bristol Repair Coalition and for that waste strategy being developed and coming out further?
I think we have to prepare a timeline. We've been putting one together. We committed in our last meeting actually to have a timeline for reviewing all the responses we've had to the very large consultation we held. I will undertake that we're going to get that back to you, and we should meet you. I'm certainly very keen that we do support repair and reuse and the work of the coalition, and what we'll do is we'll arrange a meeting, or at least one meeting, in order to discuss how to work more closely with all the organisations that you're representing, promoting repair and reuse. I do want to see that integrated into the strategy. And I'd like to say, I think you're absolutely right. We should be concerned with moving things up the waste hierarchy to reduce, repair, reuse, repurpose before we recycle materials, long before we need to incinerate materials, and certainly we shouldn't be landfilling materials either. So I would like to see us find ways to move everything up that hierarchy where it's practical, and I hope repair and reuse will be part of that. But we will get you a timeline, and we'll also make sure we arrange to meet with you. Thanks. We also, Does that cover your response to question 7? No, you have a second question. Would you like to respond to that?
So yes, we highlighted members of the Bristol Repair Coalition, which include the 2 universities as part of the Civic University Agreement, also 7net and lots of industries, SMEs, voluntary sector and volunteers as well. And as well as kind of reducing waste, reducing emissions, repair and reuse actually offers lots of opportunities for social value as well. So encouraging people to get into these new green jobs and the skills and pathways for that material circularity. So the question was, would Bristol City Council and Bristol Waste like to suggest new ways in which they might work directly with the Repair Coalition to encourage the growing repair and reuse sector in the city? And our supplementary question, the response was great, but again, could you propose actual ways to take forward the collaboration on skills development and social value from that repair and reuse?
Yes, so I suppose learning from other areas such as Surrey and Manchester, there's a really the social benefits of reuse and how you can give people opportunities, so young offenders, people who don't generally find it easy to get into the workplace. Actually, the metric is £1 equals about £3 is the metric, so there is a definite desire to do some of that, and we have within the council like our corporate parenting and all of that those sorts of strategies. So it's a case of I'm certainly happy to engage with you and think and to try and come up with ideas that would need to be business cases to stand alone to kickstart that, and there are definite examples that we can bring to Bristol, and so happy to engage sooner rather than later. It's just, yeah, I suppose I'll stop there.
Thanks very much, Ken. That's Ken Lawson, our Waste Strategic Client Manager. And I personally visited the SOFA project not long ago, and they work with offenders. They provide a trade for people. They are preparing equipment that was broken with spare parts from other equipment that they're salvaging, and that is being put back to use. And meanwhile, people are getting useful work experience and trades out of it. And we know our own contractor, Bristol Waste, has put 250,000 pieces of items back into use through their reuse shops, which is part of their social value. So I'm very keen that we do count this as part of our contract in whatever ways are appropriate, and find ways to support kind of the partnership and these multiple benefits, because it's those multiple benefits that add real value to contracts. It's not just pounds and tons of waste. It's putting things back to use and giving people skills and jobs and so on, as well as helping the environment. So I hope that's helpful, and we will be following that up with you. Thank you. So we have question number 8 is from Mark Jacobs, who's there. Mark, would you like to comment on your question and the response you've received? Thank you.
Yeah, many thanks. So my background is I'm an environmental scientist. I was also one of the founders of Sparks in Bristol, a member of the Repair Coalition, and I also volunteer at one of the Bristol Waste sites. So we've had, and we welcome the commitment to increase the amount of reuse and repair and to work strategically to do so. And as a partner, we'd be delighted to participate in that. However, my concern is kind of the here and now as well. And I'm aware that the facilities we have are far from ideal in the city. In particular, we have, in one particular site, we have an issue which has been ongoing now for a number of years of damp and mould, which is not great for items, and it's not great that we have there, not great for volunteers. So my question really is to the committee is, what commitment can you give us that you will improve the facilities we have while working with us strategically to develop plans for the future? Many thanks.
So one of the facilities you're talking about is within the Bristol Waste estate. So we will take that away and work with Bristol Waste to see what can be done about that. So thank you for highlighting it. I think when it comes to reuse, it's space and its longevity of the space. So Sparks is an amazing space, and if we can work with you to see how long we can maximise the length of it's available, then it opens up more opportunity to do more. So we can explore that certainly, but the challenge is having a financial business case for any improvements.
Thank you. And I know that the frustrations of working with meanwhile spaces or temporary spaces is sort of very real for a lot of organisations. But if we can find ways to help, we will, certainly. Thank you for that. Because I personally I've used repair cafes, and I've benefited from the reuse and repair that's going on in Bristol, and I know many people do. We had questions from Severn as well, which we haven't got a representative, have we? So we then have questions 12, 13 and 14 are from Dan Ackroyd. They're relating to City Leap. So you've had responses, and I believe you had a supplementary question to that as well?
Yeah, so I've got a supplementary to my question 12. The answer mentioned commitments made, but I find those quite difficult to understand. Please can this committee provide the public a copy of the contract between BCC and Bristol City Leap?
Thank you very much for the question, Dan. I'm afraid the contract itself is commercially sensitive. As you know, I'm sure you'll have looked, there's a lot of information about the underlying arrangements there in the public domain and were put in there when it was approved at the time, some time ago, but we'll happily dig those out and share them with you if that's helpful.
Okay, thanks. And a supplementary to my question 14. The answer mentions a 25 million investment. Please can I have the details of that £25 million figure, including both what it was spent on and what the sources of those funds were?
So the question is about, in the response, we've said Vattenfall has invested 25 million further to develop and expand the heat network. Are we able to detail that?
So we can speak to Vattenfall to ask them to obtain the information. There is a new version of the City Leap business plan which is due to be published imminently, which will give you some of that information in terms of what they've been doing to date.
So look out for the next copy of the City Leap business plan. It's the business plan of the whole joint venture by that company with the council. So I hope there'll be information there that's helpful to you.
The answer can't be answered before then? So the question can't be answered before then?
Can it?
Well, it is going to be very soon, isn't it? I can't recall. But anyway, as Helen said, Dan, we'll certainly ask Vattenfall for any more information as well.
Thanks very much, everyone, for the questions. We do also have some public forum statements. I'm looking at who we have. I'm not sure we do. Yes. I think Len is the first, you're the eighth statement, but I don't think we have anyone else, do we?
Good evening. The Bristol Parks Forum Committee is writing in support of the agenda item 9, Nature in Towns and Cities grant application. I think our statement's pretty straightforward. We're supporting the application, we're supporting the approach, and we're supporting the intentions that are set out there. And all I wanted to do was just basically bring a couple of more points out for the approach, which are in our statement, which is about how the approach could well contribute to the achievement of not just ecologically resilient and nature-rich city, but also that communities would benefit from accessible and inclusive parks, green spaces and nature. And then I've also picked up on the equality impact assessment, that there is an approach to tackle barriers and create a new system to enable collaboration. That's very welcome. And we also think that there may be an opportunity here to contribute to a wider conversation on the value and resourcing of parks and green spaces. That's always been an issue over many, many years, but on the back of this, there could be that opportunity. And finally, we hope if the application is successful, it will eventually lead to all parks and green spaces becoming nature rich and recognised for the benefits they provide to people and wildlife. So please support this application, and thank you for listening.
Thanks very much for bringing a supportive statement, Len. Much appreciated. And we're going to come on to that item later in the agenda. Okay, so we're now completed the public forum. We're going to go on to agenda item 7, which is the Domestic Energy Upgrade Scheme, the Warm Homes Local Grant. And we just note that Councillor Finch is going to leave the room for this item. Thank you. Okay. Would you like to introduce the item, please? Thank you.
So this item is to seek approval to accept a grant from the Department for Energy and Security Net Zero of around £13.5 million under the Warm Homes Local Grant Scheme. We had applied for a much higher amount under that grant scheme of around £51 million. We were awarded around a quarter of that. So this paper also asks for authority to delegate approval to, if we are able to be allocated any of that original grant application that we made up to the £51 million, delegating authority to accept and spend any additional amounts we might be awarded during the lifetime of the grant programme. The grant is a successor to two previous similar grant programmes we've had, which have been called the Home Upgrade Grant or HUGS schemes. And we've had quite a lot of success delivering decarbonisation measures to fuel poor homes in Bristol under those schemes to date. We're hoping with the monies that we've been allocated, the £13 million, we'll be able to be installing around energy efficiency measures to around 650 low-income private households within Bristol, Bath and North East Somerset and North Somerset over the next 3 years. We're anticipating of the £13 million that have been allocated, around 40 to 50% of that will be spent directly in Bristol. In terms of the grant itself, the key criteria that the grant is trying to address is to tackle fuel poverty, but also to ensure that there are upgrades made to homes to deliver carbon savings. And we would anticipate that the delivery of the grant will take place through our Bristol City Leap partners. As part of the scheme, there are a number of eligibility criteria that home owners need to meet. So the scheme applies to domestic buildings that are privately owned. The properties have to fall within a certain EPC rating between bands D and G. And then there are 3 alternative financial tests that a home can meet in order to qualify for the grant funding measures. I think the other thing that's important to draw out is there's a requirement that all the measures installed under the scheme meet PAS 2035, which is a quality standard scheme which is set by the Retrofit Academy to help ensure that the energy efficiency measures being installed are of appropriate quality. As I said, I think we've got really strong track records so far in delivering. It was disappointing we didn't get as much grant funding as we wanted because we've got a really good supply chain and ability to deliver quickly on this. But hopefully, if this paper is approved, we'll be able to move with what we've got and also be ready for if any further funding awards come our way.
Great, thanks very much, Helen. Yeah, and we do have an excellent track record in Bristol, don't we? And the work with City Leap that's continuing to upgrade homes is important, but just disappointing we didn't get as much as we were, I think, encouraged to actually bid for, weren't we? So the money has been shared around. That's obviously positive, but we could spend more if we make this decision, then we could potentially accept more money if more money becomes available later in the scheme. In other words, if others don't spend it as effectively as we know we can, we'll get that opportunity. So are there any questions about this? It's really important. We've got to tackle fuel poverty and help people save energy. Are there questions about the scheme? Okay, I've got Councillor Russell, then Councillor King. Thanks.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering about the private rented properties. I wasn't sure if there was any kind of assurance that if a rented property was given the grant and, you know, made warmer, improved, whether that would actually, whether there's any assurance that the tenants wouldn't be evicted and just benefit the landlord, then their property would be worth more, and the low-income family who were potentially living in it. Actually, does that?
Yes, it does. I don't think that there's necessarily assurances in terms of the grant funding criteria themselves, but I think, you know, it is positive that this is available for landlords. The previous iteration of this grant wasn't available to private landlords, so at least it is opening up the opportunity for them to have some funding for putting in some of these measures for their tenants.
I have a follow-up, sorry. Just checking, so if it is assigned to a private landlord, is that based on their income or the family that is or, you know, whoever's renting the home, is that their income?
That's a very good question that I'd need to take away and check. I would assume it would be whether the house is located, the home is located, and the household that it applies to, but I'd need to check that.
Okay, yeah, that would be good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, quite important questions, because adding value to the property is not the way to tackle fuel poverty if you then move those people onto other property that hasn't been improved. Am I right that there's one of the criteria is that the landlord can get a full grant for their first property, but it drops for any subsequent property. So they can start to upgrade the property, but they have to start putting money in from the second property onwards. Is that right?
That's right. I believe it's up to 5 properties, and then anything after that they have to fully fund themselves.
And then fully fund after the 5th. Okay, thank you. Councillor King, you had a question.
Thank you. In the report, it says that the final grant awarded was based on the previous 6 months of delivery. I was just wondering if you could just explain a little bit about that 6-month period and how that informed the final grant awarded.
So I think we've had very little feedback in terms of the awards of the grant, but when we've challenged how much we got awarded, it seems that across the board, generally local authorities were issued around a quarter of what they bid in for. I think in terms of the delivery under Hugs 2, we've delivered an awful lot. We're in the top 5% of delivery in the country in terms of councils that have delivered under that, so I've not got any concerns that our delivery hasn't been up to scratch.
Councillor Bernard.
Thank you. It's great to see this coming forward. I just had a question about the finances. I was doing a quick calculation of the 13.5 and 650 properties, just over 20 grand a property. Is that going to be sufficient to address issues that are likely to come across in some of the properties, given the EPC ratings that they're going to have?
I'd have to go away and check what we've done in terms of the measures that we've installed to date under Hugs 2, but I think that our calculations have been based on what we've experienced so far in terms of our current installation. Of course, there's always going to be properties where things are more expensive than others, and there'll be some properties that are easier. So I'm assuming that that's been based on an average across all of the different property types we might come across.
Yeah, I think I just know how kind of expensive it can be from having sort of overseen some of the social housing stock, and you know, it can vary greatly, can't it, in terms of 20 grand as an average is fine, but I guess it's the skills, the pipeline, the cost of materials, inflation, and some of those. So if there's any further information you could share, I'll be just interested to understand that, because that's obviously not probably going to be enough to do whole house retrofits.
Yeah. And just to comment, I think it's true, because where schemes have tried to be minimum cost to get more out of it, quality can be sacrificed, and that's why it's really reassuring that the PAS, I can't remember the number, the publicly available standard on quality of installation is really important. It means people will be able to trust the quality of what's done, and corners won't be cut to the detriment of kind of resident safety or other things, because I know that has happened in the past, or it's damaged the fabric in the past. So we get what we can from the budget that is available, but up to a reasonable quality. Councillor Crawford, you had a question.
Oh yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Helen, for bringing this. Yeah, I'm very much minded to vote for this. Of course, I think it would be a bit daft to turn down this level of funding. My question is more about the grant scheme itself. I was just wondering if you could expand a bit. Is that grant more of like an application process, or is it going to be a bit more targeted? Because often some households will struggle to access schemes like this through, lack of knowledge or potentially digital, like a lack of digital infrastructure. So I was just wondering if you could expand a bit on that, please.
Yep, so City Leap will be helping us with marketing the grant availability. We've had really good uptake for the previous Hugs ones, and I believe we already have a list of potential people that would qualify for this new grant as well, based off the work we've done on Hugs, which is really great news. We will also be going out and sort of marketing in the same way. Again, we've got information on the City Leap website. We've previously asked councillors to help with making their ward members aware of it as well, so I think we'd be planning to do that again for this new scheme.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So once the post, you're going to have postcode areas and criteria, it would be really helpful to let councillors know that. And am I right, we're also working with local advice centres who will have access to knowledge, so if people tell them they're interested in energy efficiency, they'll be referred through this, so the advice services can help direct people who have sought that advice. But getting out further is always helpful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thanks. Are there any more questions? Yeah, Councillor Kent.
Sorry, but just a quick one, but partly just based on what you've said there. If there's, say, around about 300 to 350 properties in Bristol, but tens of thousands of properties that probably qualify under the qualification in the paper, how will you manage demand if a lot of people put in for the scheme? Do you already have a process in place for that? And how, is it first come, first served? Is it based on need or some other measure?
So I think we will have to work through the kind of allocation and who sort of gets to the front of the queue as part of how we're working, when we're sort of working out how we're spending the grant going forward. At the moment, as I said, we've already got a number of applicants who've met the criteria that we're aware of, and I think to make sure we can start delivering the grant as quickly as possible, we will work with the applications that we've already got. I think what we would like to do is also try and make sure we're targeting areas where we're looking at doing other measures as well. So where we're, for example, going in and doing our social housing works, because that's some of the most efficient way of delivering some of these measures, so we can do more with the money that we've got.
Okay, if I could just quickly follow that up then. I'm just practically, I mean, if we all go out shouting about this grant, but in fact there's very, very few people who will be able to access it, simply because these measures are expensive to do. I'm just wondering practically how much councillors should go out and shout about this grant. I just want to manage expectations, that's all. I mean, the grant is great, don't get me wrong, and it's exactly what we need to be doing, but there's only enough money at the moment to do about 300 to 350 houses in Bristol. And so I think that was, I mean, how many do you have waiting in the wings, as it were, from previous applications?
We've got about 90 that potentially qualify already. So that's the majority of our first year funding. I think what I would say is I'd prefer that we spoke about it more and got more applicants, because there are qualification criteria and quite often people apply and then don't qualify. So actually a lot of other councils have had a problem of just not having enough people applying for it, and I think we've obviously done a good job in Bristol of getting people aware of it, so I prefer that we didn't sort of change that, really.
I suppose what you're saying is it's better to run out of grant and then possibly get more if there's underspend elsewhere than...
Oh, I'll happily advertise it in my ward, don't worry about that.
Certainly, yeah. Okay. You had another question, Councillor Renner.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on the grant allocation. Obviously, I note that for strongly performing local authorities against their allocations are more likely to get more grant, which is obviously really great to hear. And obviously, we've got that track record, haven't we, from the work we've done over the years historically, including while Labour was running the council. The bit I was just interested to unpick a bit is why is have they said any more about why the allocation is so low? Have they tried to spread it across more local authorities initially? I just understand that a bit more, if that's okay.
My understanding is that they've wanted to allocate it and spread it across more local authorities.
All right. If there's no more questions, are we ready to look at the recommendations to approve this report? Okay. The officer recommendations are authorise the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the committee chair, that's myself, and the Section 151 officer, to, if and to the extent that the grant application is successful, which we do aim to be successful, enter into a grant agreement and accept and spend £13,458,463. So that last pound will do something useful, I'm sure, under the Warm Homes local grant awarded by central government to Bristol City Council and its partners to deliver energy efficiency and renewable measures to low-income private households with poor energy efficiency ratings. The second recommendation is to authorise the Executive Director, again, in consultation with the Chair and the Section 151 officer, again, to invoke any subsequent extensions or variations specifically defined in the contracts being awarded up to £51,132,348, that was our original bid, in line with the provisions of the grant agreement. Thirdly, to authorise the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the committee chair and the Section 151 officer to bid for, enter into a grant agreement to accept and spend any additional funding or extensions offered by the Warm Homes local grant scheme up to the end of 2028, provided that the grant conditions remain materially the same and that it is 100% grant funded. Finally, the fourth recommendation is to authorise the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the committee chair to procure and award the contracts which may be over £500,000, hence it's a key decision of this committee, necessary for the implementation of Warm Homes local grant in line with the maximum budget envelopes outlined in this report, noting the associated legal commentaries. So those are the four formal recommendations. I'd like to move the report and the recommendations that we've just set out and ask for a seconder to vote on that. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second the report.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. So can we vote on the recommendations as set out? Are we happy to vote on all four parts in one go? Yep, thank you. So please indicate clearly with your hand. Firstly, those who vote for the recommendations. That is unanimous among those present, so no one is voting against. There are no abstentions. So we have approved that report, and we can invite the Councillor Finch back into the room. Oh, Mr. Lord, is doing that. Thank you very much for that. I think that's really important. We're getting the funding into Bristol, helping decarbonise the homes and tackle fuel poverty. So it's really important we continue to deliver, and hopefully, if others underspend, we can do more. But that's up to them, obviously. So we're going to come on to agenda item 8, which is the quarterly performance report, which is on page, just checking, 38 of our papers. Here we are. So, to any, you were going to briefly introduce this report. We've had similar ones before. Would you like to highlight anything we should note tonight? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is quarter 3. So we're in quarter 4. The report highlights that there is a lag to the reporting into committee, and that's something that we are working with our Democratic Service colleagues to work that through. The report highlights the progress specifically against the business plan targets, of which 86% are on track, which is really good, and there are references to some movements within certain targets within the report. There is reference to in point 5 in terms of the report linked to fly tipping incidents and how it's currently reported in terms of reported and removed, and the need, as further to previous conversations at this committee, to ensure that we amend that indicator as part of the business plan refresh. The council is currently working through and finalising the corporate strategy, and then subsequently the business plan will be updated, to which we'll give the opportunity for members of this committee to work with officers to refresh the bundle of indicators that would be monitored during the year. The report also provides an update as requested in relation to the collection service for our waste and recycling service, and I've included in here information on the current performance, as well as going back to the start of this year, or December of 24. We, as a client lead, we work very closely with Bristol Waste to ensure that collections performance is of utmost priority and a key priority for the waste company. And you'll see from the graphs shared and the information that pleasingly the performance has improved significantly, particularly in the recycling level of drop roads, and pleased to say that in the last 3 weeks all recycling rounds have been collected without the need for a weekend service. The report brings to life information in terms of what Bristol Waste are doing actively in relation to recruitment of new staff, as well as tighter control in relation to activity in and out of the depot. Vehicles remain a significant challenge for the company in relation to the maintenance of and keeping vehicles on the roads. But they've suffered particularly in relation to the narrow vehicle fleet, but as identified in the report, some mutual aid support from Bath and North East Somerset Council around loan of vehicles. And the final point in the report linked to this particular issue refers to the new baler facility that has been invested in through funds from the council to Bristol Waste to build a new shed and a new baling facility with a new baler. So we're working closely with the Environment Agency at the moment regarding permit. That will enable us to bring that site into active use, because at the moment it's still not active, and that will take a considerable amount of strain out of the baler at Albert Road depot, the transfer centre, but also the northern rounds of the city that take place on a Thursday and a Friday. They would then be able to drop and also bale at Avonmouth, so it would save time, would save fuel costs. I'll end it there, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that. Yeah, I'm particularly keen that baler in Avonmouth comes into service, because as a councillor for a ward in the north of the city where cardboard can be missed because the vehicles are full, and then they have a very long journey to offload the cardboard and return, that has remained a bit of a problem in the ward. So we're looking forward to that being resolved. Are there any questions about the performance report then? Councillor Kent, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Ken, I don't think this is going to surprise you. I'm going to bring up fly tipping. First off, I want to thank the team for removing some fly tipping from one of our parks really, really fast. And Neighbourhood Enforcement have already been sent the photographs of the fly tipper who was caught in action by a resident. So I hope that will result in some form of prosecution, because they did dump a whole truckload in a park. I do want to raise the issue, though, of the asbestos that was left just lying on a street in Whitchurch for nearly a month by Bristol Waste, even though it was reported to them again and again and again. I know you've picked this up, but I am concerned that we don't have robust systems in dealing with hazardous waste. The idea that they just come along and go, we can't deal with this, so they close the job down, which is what I presume was happening, is just totally unacceptable. No barriers were put up, no safety measures. Whether this stuff was asbestos or not, of course, you cannot tell by looking at it, because it's that corrugated roof sheeting, which is littering our city. Now, these sort of dumps are happening quite regularly now in the Hengrove and Whitchurch Park area. I'm sure we've probably got one very, very bad rogue builder who's doing it. But at the same time, this is about the safety of the residents. When I went along there to take a look, I saw children, probably about age 10, just playing only 20 feet away from this asbestos, which had begun to crumble. Well, sheets that might have been asbestos on the street. And I'm just really worried that Bristol Waste completely and utterly dropped the ball on dealing with that stuff. Now, once strong complaints began, they did clear it by bringing in the specialist contractor. My question is, why did they not do that 25 days before when they first saw it? Why did they just keep driving away from it, leaving it there on the street in Chesington Avenue? Thank you.
Right. Okay. So that is a system failure, and Bristol Waste are looking into the issues that occurred there to lead to the failure. There were actually 2 other fly tips of asbestos that occurred at the same time, and they were removed. And so there are a couple of reasons it occurred. You know, the staff didn't feel empowered to deal with it, and they did a risk assessment and they didn't say it was part of their safe working procedure. When it was escalated, the supervisors didn't go and check on it and take a pragmatic approach about the wider risk. So as the client team, we are now reviewing that, because you have to take into consideration the wider impact on the public as well as your staff. So there will be changes that occur in that system, and dare I say, the Fix My Street reporting system, which gives us greater transparency at the client end and the council end, will allow us to delve into those and see more, give us greater transparency and monitoring. So there is an apology. It has been done, and you know we're looking at long-term fix.
Thanks for that, addressing that. Okay, Councillor Renard.
Apologies, I've got a few questions. I'm going to come back to flyer tipping, but just wanted to start with recycling rates actually. And it was one of the things I was interested in is what level of granularity do you have that data in terms of, do you have it by ward, lower super output area? You know, how granular does it go? Because I think that data, if I assume will be considered as part of the deliberations of the new waste strat, but would be really useful to know, because we're starting to talk about measures we're going to take to improve recycling, reduce waste. We obviously need to make sure that we're thinking about where there's going to be variations in that 45%, isn't there, in different areas of the city, and that might necessitate different solutions. So I just want to know what level of granularity is there for that data, and are we thinking about that in how we're going to take things forward?
So we do have a working group that is looking at data, because it's certainly an area that Bristol Waste that can improve. And at the moment, the data is based on rounds. So it's where they pick waste up, and it's around. So it's not going to link ideally with wards. There'll be overlaps, and it's vehicle types, and there will be errors, because when you have different vehicles, they may not be when you look back and do analysis, if you were looking at a ward on a day, you might have different vehicles in there. So managing that data is going to be challenging to get that 100% performance per ward. But as we move forward, we should be able to get greater granularity to give an indication of banding of performance. But at the moment, we're not there. Like, we have very granular data, but when you then ask to make it geographic and per round, it gets quite complicated, because the materials are bulked, dropped off. You got waste, you got recycling, you got the recycling that goes out. It doesn't get measured individually coming in, so you only can generate the overall. So and the recycling rounds don't necessarily all overlap as well. So the waste and the recycling don't overlap, because waste rounds can do more properties per round than recycling. So there are some challenges, but we there is good data, but it's just not a sort of area-based approach.
Yeah, that's helpful, and certainly a challenge to grapple with. My second question relating to recycling, before I come on to graffiti and then fly tipping, if you'll indulge me. At the moment, obviously it's static at the moment, isn't it? The recycling rate's 45%. One of the things that I noticed sort of checking on the council website fairly regularly is it's almost impossible to get a food recycling container at the moment, and you're constantly at a start. It's got raised at a meeting of party group leaders with the MD of Bristol Waste on Monday. So I'm interested if we're going to try and drive up recycling rates, obviously people need to be able to have the containers to recycle in. Would you agree? And what's going to be done to address that? Because what came out of the meeting the other day is it's, although there's now obviously national pressure with food recycling being rolled out in other places, whereas we're a bit ahead of the game here, is that it seems that we've not ordered enough food recycling containers when we've done further orders. And so we keep running out, and so people are going to be putting their food waste in the black bin, aren't they?
Again, a part of the data project will be looking at stock levels and stock management, because if you miss a certain point to do an order, the lead-in times now are a lot longer than they used to be. So we are working on that data with Bristol Waste. So then if we've got greater transparency as a client team, we can then have some oversight of making sure they hit their targets, because it can easily go wrong. And so we're working on that.
Yeah, so I think it's been over a couple of months though.
Yeah, I think from further to Monday, the party group leads a meeting in terms of with the government making the instruction from the 1st of April that every council needs to provide a food service is obviously a big challenge for supply. In terms of the consultation that we've just undertaken to understand what we do and what presentation we want at curbside, particularly in terms of then therefore what type of bin, sack, tub, whatever we use, we do need to work that through to then give us that lead-in time, as you say, with enough time to whatever we do roll out. There is parity across the city, and as you say, we don't want commingle curbside, one, because it may not get collected, but also it takes longer at each household. So yes, we do need to ensure that there's a lead-in time to give us enough time to give us the supply we need.
And just a quick last follow-up on that particular point. So obviously we have 2 food recycling bins, don't we? We have the smaller one for the house and then the bigger one that we put outside, that is collected from. If people have not got a big one but have still got a little one, could they be putting that out in the meantime so the food is still getting recycled?
I mean, they could put it out and it could get recycled.
And it will
it's
get
just,
collected.
it would get collected. There is more risk that it might go walkies or blown away because it's that lighter and doesn't have the weight.
That's fine, thank you. So graffiti and then a couple on flight of it. Thank you. So just on graffiti, I went around one Sunday driving around my ward. I've got quite a lot of graffiti appearing in one part, particularly on roads between Filton Road and Filton Avenue. So logged several through the council MP inquiries, only for those to be closed and not dealt with. So I just want to flag that because I've got a bunch more to add, and I think that there's a bit of concern. Obviously, graffiti is not dealt with quickly. More starts appearing in those points, and so I've got, as you'd imagine, quite a lot of unhappy residents in the wards at the moment because the volume of it that's starting to appear. And if we take the time to log it, obviously keen to see that one, it's addressed, and then two, where it is addressed, that you can't still see the graffiti after it's painted over, which has also been a challenge. So I just wondered, could that be? Sorry, I know it's a bit of a ward-specific issue, but
yeah, I mean, graffiti. I don't know why they would have been closed. They shouldn't be closed. They should be open. Certainly on Fix My Street. We don't give a response time to graffiti anymore because we used to have one, but what it encouraged was Bristol Waste to run around removing graffiti in a time-based approach, which meant they were driving all over the city to meet the time rather than removing as much graffiti as possible. So we've got an area-based approach to get there's square meterage removed per pump crew. And I would say that if you have a concern about your ward, raise it as an MP, report it so we know where it is, because the data will then give us hotspots of action, and also raise it as an inquiry, because the team can then look at your requirements and see if they can pull together a package so that Bristol Waste do lots of graffiti in one area to maximise the amount we're removing. We shouldn't forget that the city has a very conflicted relationship with graffiti, and it is a crime, and it takes seconds to spray on, but it takes quite a lot longer to remove. So we are fighting a bit of a losing battle when it comes to graffiti. We would love to be able to remove it, but the resource needed is far greater than the council could afford.
Yeah, it'd be good to do a walkabout perhaps with a couple of the teams, just so I can show sort of some of the hot spots. It's been a real challenge and getting worse. But anyway, sorry, because I know others. I've been hogging the mic. So just on fly tipping. So it's a couple of things. I mean, we've had Right Honourable Steve Weed, MP, down today. Myself and Ellie just having a look at some fly tipping and some of the issues that there are. It takes a keen interest in Bristol with the recent waste and recycling consultation. One of the things I noticed is there has been almost 1,900 more incidents in the Q3 period than there was a year ago. I'd be interested just to understand a bit more about why that is. Is that because actually reporting's improved, or are we starting to see an uptick in flighting? Because that's a huge increase for a 3-month period.
So with fly tipping, we actually put more resource in for a month at the start of September to remove fly tipping from the HRA estate. It had built up because the KPI, which Councillor Kent has not picked me up on, which I'm surprised about, is still in the pack, and it's around reported and removed. So that reflects how much more work Bristol Waste have done. So they have there's the reported and removed element, which is a DEFRA target that we have to report on. So we removed more because we put more resource in to try and clear a backlog that had built up, and that's why there was a big spike. We also think, looking back, that there was a delay. The cost of living meant that people weren't. A lot of fly tip materials fall into like 3 or 4 different categories. One is people fly tip bagged waste because they live a flat above a shop, or their bin's full, or they they put it beside their communal bin, and that's fly tipping, or they put bags of materials outside charity shops, that's fly tipping. Commercial waste like that is all fly tipping. So that's that sort of waste. There's also purchasing, so people replacing their furniture or getting rid of broken furniture, and what we think was the cost of living suppressed some of that purchasing. And then now with inflation sort of dropping and wages going up a bit, we think last year towards the end we saw an uptake in sort of expenditure. So people were potentially fly tipping more because potentially they felt a little bit better off in comparison to where they had been. We don't have any data on that, but it's sort of nationally and certainly locally, when the cost of living crisis was fully on, there was like a 20% drop in fly tipping, and then towards the end of last year it started ticking up again. So you're seeing a compounded impact of more fly tips removed and also potentially more being put out.
Yeah, I think there's just final couple of, I guess, questions and points that just linked to that. I think there is also something about dealing with the cause of fly tips, because sometimes actually the issue might be something like clothes banks. So, to give examples, opposite my ward, in on the green, Filton Road, it's a set of clothes banks. They're not charity ones, from a well-known provider that's caused, I think, problems across the city. And there was fly tipping. The fly tipping would be cleared, and then more fly tipping would appear, and then it would be cleared, and then more fly tipping would appear, and then it would be cleared. And it's been like that since last summer.
Yeah.
It's only been in recent weeks, probably about 4 weeks ago, that those clothing bins were actually removed after repeated visits to deal with the fly tipping. And so I think one of the things I'd really push for and advocate for is just thinking about what we can do to address some of the root causes, make sure we're investing more in enforcement as well. But you wouldn't have had to do so many trips if those clothing banks had been removed far earlier, as residents and councils had asked for.
Yeah, I mean, those closed banks are similar to the commercial waste bins that we used to see across the city. We do still see in some places, and the project's ongoing, but if you have banks on the street, they become honeypot, what we could term as, or what I term as honeypots. So people see them and they think, well, I can put my waste beside it or in it, and if it's full, it just goes on the floor. So those blanks were removed. Hopefully the problem is now gone. And the commercial waste project that we've implemented over the last 2 years has removed lots of commercial bins, and we've removed lots of commercial, those similar sorts of problems. And we've still got a lot to do, because there's a lot of residential bins on the streets that we need to try and get off. the streets to reduce the opportunity or the behaviour, which is we'll just put rubbish beside it.
And then think quick fire point, and then I will stop.
No, you've done quite a lot of casework as well, so Councillor Russell has been waiting.
All right, I was going to make a point about the HRA land, but fine.
Yeah, I just had 2 points. One, around fly tipping, I was just going to note that repair cafes and things like that will probably reduce fly tipping. So yeah, just through the Task and Finish group, I'm excited to look into how we can support that more. My other point was going to be about graffiti, and I just wanted to sort of ask if there was anything in place sort of to protect certain graffiti spots or pieces of art. There was some sort of public frustration at covering up certain pieces of graffiti in the city, and I wondered if there was any like way that we or Bristol Waste has a way to differentiate those, or is it just sort of whatever gets covered gets covered? And potentially there's scope for a conversation there as well, maybe in culture group or something.
So that's the differentiation between street art and things that have been created rather than tagging or graffiti.
Yeah.
Which might be more damaging and so on. It's I think there's scope to do some work on how we manage that, because we don't appear to differentiate, do we?
Yeah, the policy's quite high level at the moment, and it is quite subjective. So there was a bit of a mistake with some graffiti. I think it was Cotton, Montpellier area, Montpellier, wasn't it? So there was a bit of a mistake where they painted over because they saw some tags on it. But it wasn't. But it was made with good intention, and they've learnt a lesson from that. So we try and take a risk-based approach to removal of graffiti.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Thank you. It might be useful to be in touch with the councillors of the ward if there's confusion in future. They might know which pieces are more significant. But yeah, I'm happy for that to be sort of open conversation.
That's a helpful suggestion. Thank you. Yeah, because I think there is more work to be done to clarify what's valued and appreciated, and potentially kind of quite intentional as opposed to what's just been done as a sort of tagging exercise. This was a report to note because it's the quarterly performance. Are we happy we've noted all the things? You got a question, Councillor King? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask about the sort of thorny issues of unadopted pieces of land that I'm sure are in all our wards. So yeah, we visited one this morning, and it's that from what I understand, the policy is that it's the responsibility of the houses nearby to manage it. If it's not, that's what I've been told in emails. But there's these regular spots that get fly tipped all the time by a mixture of domestic and commercial fly tippers. And is that something that we can add to this strategy group? Because I think it's trying to understand what the approach is, and I know that there's lots of residents that complain about this and then get told that's not council-owned land, so it's not our responsibility. At the same time, then I've got an elderly gentleman where it regularly happens because he backs onto the cycle path and then is unable to physically do it himself but has been told that he has to, or like a patch next to a community centre which is or is not council-owned land. I can't find a definitive answer on that, which regularly gets fly tipped with mattresses, sofas and loads of bin bags, as we saw this morning. So I just think it's an issue, and I'm sure it's across many of the areas in the city, and I know it's a thorny one, and I'm not saying necessarily that it's all on the council to do this, but it does strike me as a policy area that needs to be looked at, because the idea that it's the responsibility of whoever lives locally, I don't think that's ever going to be recognised by the residents as being a fair approach, especially if they're not the ones that have had anything to do with that fly tipping. It strikes me as very unfair. So I'd like that to be something that we look at.
So it's unadopted land or unclaimed land or unclear ownership of land?
Unclear ownership of land, yeah. Those thorny bits we have in all our wards.
I think we we should have a way of kind of clarifying that or addressing that.
Yeah, more than happy to take that forward. I think the role that the council fulfills in the city is really important and can enable, as well as to look at it from a problem-solving approach, designing it out. We've got some really good examples of pockets of land which have been hotspots for flight tips, which we've looked creatively with. Lots of good work with community payback in relation to clear-ups, as well as changing, designing out planting. So I think we've got lots of good examples of that, working not only within the street scene service, but also closely with Penny German service around neighbouring communities, although clearly we've got fewer community development, community engagement, but those interfaces with communities are really important. So, and if there is a blight in relation to a fly tip and the broken window scenario of it more and more, we should step in, I think we do. But in terms of unpicking that and the non-adopted or unadopted highway, then yeah, I think we should build that in and we'll take that away.
Good. That's helpful. Hopefully we can find a way to bring the right people together and sort of make it clearer how to deal with it. Okay. Can we move on to agenda item 9, which is... we have to, yes. So we're formally noting the report, having asked various questions. Thank you. So agenda item 9 is Nature in Towns and Cities grant funding. And I just have to sort of clarify. So it's about this, the proposal is to seek approval to submit a bid to the Nature in Towns and Cities programme, and if successful, the acceptance of the funding and delivery of the project, and to seek approval to apply for Nature, Towns and Cities accreditation, which is a scheme that we could apply for in due course. And it is a key decision because it affects 2 or more wards. But I'm just drawing attention to the fact there's an exempt appendix, Appendix A, that has been circulated to councillors. If we want to discuss that, we would have to close the chamber for the public or the press, because it's an exempt report, because it does contain details of the proposed bid, and bidding is still open and other people will be making their bids in other towns and cities. So we don't have to move to exempt setting if you're happy to stick to the public part of the report, but we would if we're going to stray into the details in the appendix. So just to clarify that. So we can have an introduction to it. Alex Minshall.
Thank you. I'll introduce this. Alex Minshall, I'm still sitting Climate Change Manager at City Council, and we've got colleagues here, Richard Ennion, who's Parks Development Manager, and Kit Beaumont, who's Ecological Emergency Coordinator. And they have, with colleagues, been working in detail on the proposals. So in kind of very much in headline terms, this proposal, it's very much about both wildlife and people, and how we help both improve wildlife and improve the access of people to that wildlife and nature sort of on their doorstep. And it's a programme that has been launched by the a consortium, including the National Trust, Natural England and the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And so what the funding is seeking to do is provide funding to build the capacity of and provide skills and development for the City Council and for other partners in the city, in order that we can improve that nature and improve that access to nature. It's not a capital project, it's not a capital fund which would allow us to spend it on doing things in the parks or open spaces or highways or other bits of places where we may be able to improve nature. It's therefore unusual in terms, and it's therefore perhaps not surprising that when the consortium and the programme issued the expression of interest and two-stage process and said, who would like to apply? And then we'll invite an appropriate number of applications that we like, or expression of interest that we like, to apply for the full stage. There were nearly 300 local authorities or bids in from local authorities and combined authorities. I'm not sure how many local authorities there are, but I think that's the vast majority of them. And so we were delighted when we were one of a small number that was selected and invited to apply in detail. And so we've set out in the appendix the proposals, and this very much is seeking to address the priorities of the funding call, but it also builds on experience, priorities, and the sort of track record of things that have been happening in the city and I'm talking about things that colleagues very much have been doing here, but we're, you heard from the Parks Forum this afternoon, very much about their support for the approach that's been taken, and this is very much, whilst a City Council-led application, it's very much being developed with the rich ecosystem, if I can use that word, of organisations that are working on nature and public parks and open spaces in the city. The total budget, maximum budget we can apply for is £1 million with a 5% match requirement, and that match funding can be staff time or other in-kind contributions. And our intention is to apply for that maximum amount. Councillor Fodor also mentioned the third part of the recommendation, which is to seek approval to apply to the Nature Towns and Cities Accreditation Programme, and this is another part of the programme they've established to really ensure that they can they're not just investing in a small number of places, but they are helping to improve the quality and in sort of nature terms and the accessibility of nature across a much wider cohort of cities and towns that can use the accreditation process to improve what they're doing. And we'll be exploring that. The reason that the recommendation is framed as it is in order to give us time to understand further what the accreditation means, the advantages, what it would offer the City Council and the city, and then the sort of costs of achieving it, and bring a proper proposal forward. So that's the plan. And I say the details are, reiterate what Councillor Fodor said, details are exempt from publication, not out of any level of secrecy, but in terms of to ensure that we're able to make our bid and work through our bid and protect its contents from other cities and towns that we are in competition with. And it's just an unfortunate nature of the timing of the proposal. In 2 weeks' time, we'll be very happy to share more details. Thank you. We're obviously happy to take any further questions, and we can make a judgment about whether they're general nature or whether we think they would start to expose any details that we wouldn't necessarily want to put in the public domain at this point.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for working in partnership with all the organisations and colleagues within the council and well beyond the council to sort of put this together. We hope we stand reasonable odds, but are there any questions about the general nature of the bid which don't stray into the exempt appendix, firstly? Go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, do we have questions based on the exempt appendix which would necessitate us making this an exempt session? I don't see any. Would you like to ask one in general terms then? If it refers to what's in the public report, then that's okay.
It does, yeah, it does. I might have mentioned something else, but I won't. I just wondered if you were able to share any more. You mentioned that there would be 3. I forget what they are called, but 3 sort of communities that would benefit from it. Are you able to share any more about what communities they might be and what criteria they might be for selecting them? And obviously I'm aware that we've had an amazing successes from the previous work with communities through the I've forgotten what it's called, climate and nature community partnership. Thank you. So I wondered if it was likely to sort of overlap with that or not, and yeah, that sort of thing.
So we've invited the communities to express interest in being part of that process. Not in order to select them at this point, but to understand whether or not the ideas that we had developed with partners actually resonated with those communities and were things that they wanted to do. And so we've shared, we sent out expression of interest to quite widely through our distribution lists. And I think we received 17 expressions of interest from communities in different parts of the city, and also some representing different communities of interest or other characteristics. And so we're confident there's a lot of interest out there, and were we to be successful, we would then run a formal application process to select the appropriate community organisations, because we're saying community, we're actually selecting community organisations that we would work with. And one of the key areas that we wanted to say was, if an organisation is working in a neighbourhood, there's often not just an organisation in a neighbourhood. They might be a development trust or something covering a couple of wards, but there will be, within that, there'll be friends of groups representing this park or that nature reserve. And so we were very keen that how those organisations can work with all the organisations in that neighbourhood. And so whilst we might work with 3 core organisations, it will actually probably, hopefully, touching wood, involve many more in 3 neighbourhoods or 3 other geographies. Is there anything else we want to add?
No, not particularly. I mean, that's probably
we're still on the webcast. So.
Yeah, we so we haven't pressed the button. Thank you, I've been helped. So we haven't excluded community organisations that haven't developed a community climate action plan as such, but we have recognised that the strength of those and what they represent. So they're on the principle of building on what, this is a building upon the foundations approach, they're a strong point of reference. And quite a number of the organisations that have come through this expression of interest have identified that they have got such plans, and within there's detail. So that gives us, a cohort that have, but there's also some other interesting ones that haven't, and that's why we didn't limit it, because it's about hearing from communities. So we just wanted to say that.
And perhaps if I add, also we focused the special interest on communities, the more disadvantaged communities in the city, and asked organisations how they would work with particular parts of the city that experience that deprivation, or particular communities that are more marginalised. So we have targeted very much at groups that may not have the same levels of mobility or access to nature as others in the city. So very much focused it.
Thanks for that. Did you have a follow-up question to that?
Oh, not really a follow-up question, I guess, but yeah, thank you for the reassurance. And yeah, it's really good to hear that sort of communities with less access to nature will be prioritised. I feel like that's really important, and that it's not just limited to those that already have community action plans, because I guess we don't want to see it becoming increasingly concentrated on certain areas and leaving out others that haven't had the benefits so far. Yeah, so thank you.
Great, thanks very much. I mean, to me, it's a really worthwhile thing to have got through to this fight, this having pre-qualified into this stage. It's really positive. So fingers crossed that the bid can be successful, because it'll allow us to do quite a lot, won't it? And it will build a lot more capacity in the city and strengthen sort of involvement with nature. Yeah, Councillor King, go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick one for me. Just to follow up on what Councillor Finch was talking about, and it's a line of question that I asked about in the briefing as well, is what was the involvement of the community climate action groups. And I do have a little caveat in my head that still, I appreciate that bringing in other groups, but I guess I'm interested in the criteria of which those groups fall under, because the community climate action plans deliberately focused on areas of disadvantage, on minoritized communities, and not only place-based ones, but citywide ones as well. In the last cohort were citywide organisations that we're experiencing disadvantage as well. So I guess there's just then all these organisations have produced these plans that have gone out and door knocked in their communities and ran events, and a lot of them on very little resource to do so, and then come up with these plans, which I know you all know very well. But then there's that bit about, okay, and then what? How was the resource to then bring those climate action plans into fruition and actually not disappoint their residents as well? So I guess I'm just interested in making sure that the other organisations that will be selected or will be considered still meet that criteria of being in areas of disadvantage, of being minoritised, of needing that support and that opportunity for equity of access and etc. Thank you. But otherwise, I really welcome and encourage the bid.
I mean, yeah, that was a key question in the EOI. We tried to keep it high level. We appreciate these organisations are often, working with volunteers. They've not got a lot of resource. We didn't want to create a very onerous selection process before we knew we had the money. But we did set some criteria, and one of those was, they represented or worked in people that lived in the 30% most deprived LSOAs in the city. So, or a marginalised community. So that's kind of one of the selection criteria within the EOI that they've all responded to, and everyone that submitted one met that, baseline.
And just to address the other part of the question, which is implicit, is that how are we helping communities that have developed community climate action plans to secure resources to accelerate the delivery of those? And that's going to be probably capital money rather than this kind of revenue money, which is what we're talking about in this case. And so there are other initiatives that we're doing. So, for example, with our partners, developing a prospectus of some of the actions that were identified, some of the projects that are in those plans, which we can then present for funding and investment opportunities. So there are lots of other activities going on in other parts of the service and council and partners to try and bring investment and funding to those plans to help that delivery.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure I totally agree it's revenue. It's just capital that's needed. I think revenue is a very important part of those plans too, but yeah, take your point. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah. So it's obviously it's an ongoing challenge to find ways to support groups who want to be more involved, want to be ambitious, and we want to help them to do that. So that's a sort of parallel track we always have to pursue with these things. Thinking we can move forward to the recommendations of this report and not have to close the session. So thank you for answering those questions. The recommendations to us are that the committee approves the Council's application to the Nature in Towns and Cities programme as set out in the Appendix A, which is exempt. Now, if the application is successful, the committee authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the committee chair, to take all steps required to accept and spend the funding from Nature, Towns and Cities to implement the project as set out in the proposals in Appendix A1, and to make any amendments to the project as necessary for successful delivery. And then thirdly, authorises the Executive Director, Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the committee chair, to take all steps required to apply for Nature, Towns and Cities accreditation, which could follow on, as we said. So I'm going to move the report and those three recommendations. Do I have a seconder for that?
I'll second the report.
Thank you, Councillor King. Are we happy to take them all three together and vote? Okay. So can we vote by showing hands in support of those recommendations set out? That is unanimous. So all in favour, no one against, no one abstaining. So that means we have approved that report and the process for completing and submitting the bid and following through, I hope, if we're successful. So thanks very much for that. That's the last item on the agenda. Thanks to everyone who's attended. Thank you to those who almost made it to the end in the gallery and anyone watching on the webcast. Our next meeting is on Thursday, the 29th of May. So until then, we're adjourning. Thank you.